Greetings, I am Szántai Gábor, and this is the fourth episode of the Hungarian History Podcast. One of my goals is to highlight Hungary's long and often overlooked struggle against the Ottoman Empire, a more than 3 centuries long conflict that helped shape the fate of Europe. Hungarian history deserves its place in the broader European story, especially for its role in defending Western civilization. Last time we looked at how different nations viewed the Ottoman conquest. Now we began tracing the major events of the Ottoman wars. I will admit I was overly ambitious in saying it could be all be told in one episode. I cheated you. The story is far too vast. So today we will focus on just the first phase up to the year 1456. While preparing this podcast, I realized that a simple timeline isn't enough. We also need a bit of context. First, it is important to know there wasn't constant war between the Ottomans and the Hungarians. There were periods of peace, but they were never truly stable. When a sultan died, all previous treaties were void, and either war resumed automatically or a new treaty had to be signed for a set time. The wars were marked by regular campaigns, though the sultans themselves didn't always lead them. Many were directed by grand viziers, the Pasha of Buda, or the other local commanders. Even during so-called peace, fighting never fully stopped. Along the wide frontier between Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, a constant low-level conflict, known as the Small War, raged on, regardless of truces and treaties. Over generations, a distinct warrior culture emerged there, known as the Valiant Order. It was an unofficial brotherhood, with its own values and customs. Interestingly, even Ottoman warriors were sometimes seen as members of this informal knightly order, respected by their Christian foes. These warriors were the regular fighters of the Small War, a constant border conflict where both sides agreed not to use cannons or besiege major castles. But these rules were often broken. When Hungarian hussars raided successfully, the Pasha of Buda would send angry letters of protest to the Habsburg king in Vienna or Prague. Still, when the king received his share of the loot, he often chose to ignore the complaints. To move forward, we need a basic overview of more than 3 centuries of war, focusing only on the key events. Without this foundation, it would be hard to explore the interesting details later, so I have divided the period I call the Ottoman Wars into 6 clear, manageable parts. Here they are. 1. I define the first phase of the Ottoman Wars as spanning from 1366 to 1456, from the first clashes between Hungarian forces under King Lajos or Louis the Great during his Bulgarian campaign to the famous Battle of Nándorfehérvár, now Belgrade, in 1456. 2. The second phase covers the time of King Matthias Corvinus and lasts until the disastrous Battle of Mohács in 1526. 3. The third phase tells the story of the time of the dual kingship, when Habsburg Ferdinand and King Szapolyai both claimed the Hungarian throne. This was also the famous era of the Castle Wars, which ended when the 15 Years' War started in 1591–92. 4. The fourth phase is the 15 Years' War, also known as the Long Turkish War. In this part, we will also talk briefly about the birth and early years of the Principality of Transylvania. 5. The fifth phase covers the 17th century, from Bocskai's anti-Habsburg uprising in 1604, through the campaigns led by Transylvanian princes up to the fall of Nagyvárad, now Oradea, in 1660. We also need to mention the heroic fights of Hungarian-Croatian commander Zrínyi Miklós, Nikola Zrinski, in 1664. 6. The sixth and final phase begins with anti-Habsburg movements in Hungary, which started soon after the suspicious death of Zrínyi. The Wesselnyi conspiracy and the rise of Prince Tököl Imre in North Hungary and Transylvania eventually led to the siege of Vienna in 1683. After that, the Habsburg-led Reconquest War gradually pushed the Ottomans out, ending around 1699. Finally, the War of Independence led by Prince Rákóczi Ferenc from 1703 to 1711 must also be mentioned, as it helps us understand the true legacy of the Ottoman Wars. It was one thing to conquer the Balkan Orthodox countries with force, but quite another to convert them. Despite King Louis's efforts, the people of the Balkans stayed loyal to the Eastern Orthodox Church, and their feelings toward Hungary remained distant, if not outright hostile. So while they became Hungarian vassals, they were never true allies. They saw Hungary as a threat to their identity. In earnest, they couldn't be counted on in later wars against the Turks. These early clashes can also be seen as preventive strikes against the Ottomans. Some historians believe that without these campaigns, the Balkans would have fallen to Ottoman rule even earlier, and so would Constantinople. The Turks' fierce bravery and unusual fighting style helped them expand rapidly, and by the 1360s they were attacking Serbian, Bulgarian, Greek, and Macedonian lands. The first direct military clash between the Hungarians and the Turks happened in 1366. During a campaign led by King Louis, the Ottomans sent troops to support their Bulgarian vassal, who had captured the Byzantine emperor. Louis tried to join forces with a European Crusader army, backed by the Pope, to rescue the emperor and confront the growing Ottoman threat. Now that we understand some of the background, let's go back to the beginning of the conflict. The Ottomans didn't cross from Anatolia into Europe to pick flowers. At first, the Byzantine Empire stood in their way. Hungary tried to block their advance into the Balkans, which began around 1352 when the Ottomans set foot in Europe. Just 2 years later, they captured the fortress of Gallipoli. They quickly grew fond of their new territory. In 1362, they made Edirne their European capital. Hungarians called it Drinapoly, but once it was known as Hadrianopolis. Now this city lies in the westernmost corner of Turkey. King Louis was a true Night King, who fought nearly every year of his 40-year reign from 1342 to 1382. While the Ottomans expanded westward, Hungary was pushing south and east, seeing Serbia and Bulgaria as part of its own sphere of influence. It's no surprise that King Louis tried to weaken Turkish influence and strengthen Hungarian control in the region, thus creating a buffer zone between Hungary and the Ottomans. Still, the Turks were not in his main concern. His campaigns in the Balkans were mostly aimed at bringing the Serbs, Bosnians, Wallachians, and Bulgarians into the Roman Catholic Church. Unfortunately, this policy pushed many locals away. The Ottomans, with their more lenient religious tolerance, seemed like the lesser evil. Orthodox Slavic and Wallachian rulers found themselves caught between Hungary and the Ottoman Empire and had to carefully balance between the two. So King Louis marched out and defeated the Bulgarians and their Ottoman allies, or so say the European sources. Turkish chronicles claim the opposite, that the Ottomans won. Some argue that Louis was victorious because he later built a church in Mariazell to commemorate the event. More convincingly, his conquest, the Banate of Bodon in Bulgaria, remained under Hungarian control for some more years. The Bulgarians only managed to push the Hungarians out later. In 1367, Louis launched another campaign in Bulgaria, likely fighting the Turks again. Francesco Carrara, the Lord of Padua, even sent 300 soldiers from Zeng to join him. But Louis' resources were stretched thin. He no longer had enough troops to deal with both Bulgaria and Wallachia, and Turkish influence in Wallachia grew stronger. Ironically, although the Bulgarians had some success against Hungary, they lost the most. Their castles and lands were gradually taken over by the Ottomans. By the 15th century, Bulgaria had become a core province of the empire and was one of the last to break free from Ottoman rule. The Ottoman Empire was built on constant expansion. In 1371 they crushed the Serbs at the Battle of Maritsa, and this victory brought them right next to the Hungarian border. The following year, King Louis lost the Venetian-Hungarian War, during which the Turks sent troops to support Venice. In 1374, Louis' army was ambushed and defeated by the Wallachians, again with Ottoman help. Still, Turkish raiders who entered Transylvania in that year were quickly driven off. In 1377, Louis defeated the Wallachians and the Bulgarian ruler Sisman, who was a vassal of Sultan Murad. But even this wasn't a final or decisive victory. Encouraged by Louis' efforts, the rulers of Serbia, Bosnia, Wallachia, and Albania also tried to stop the Turks on their own. But they didn't coordinate with Hungary, and they were divided among themselves. As a result, they couldn't form a strong, united front against the Ottoman advance. But the Turks didn't stop. They captured Niš, and yet Serbian ruler Lazar didn't expect another Ottoman attack. Instead, he invaded Hungary with help of King Trutko I of Bosnia. Why? Because King Louis had died in 1382 and Hungary was in turmoil. Seeing their chance, the Serbs and Bosnians attacked the Sirmium region of Hungary to support opponents of Zsigmond of Luxembourg, whom we Hungarians call Zsigmond. After defeating Hungarian forces and capturing several towns, they were suddenly faced with more Ottoman attacks. Then they offered peace to Zsigmond, who had just become King of Hungary. When the Balkan states finally united against the Turks, it was too late. In 1389, the Ottomans won a decisive victory at the First Battle of Rigómező, Kosovo-Polje. This sealed the fate of the Balkans, which remained under Ottoman rule until 1912. After the Battle of Kosovo-Polje, Lázár's widow, Milica, was forced to recognize the supremacy of Sultan Bayezid I. Seeing this, Hungary attempted an attack on Serbia because Zsigmond aimed to establish a frontier between Hungary and the Ottomans. But the Serbs repelled it with Turkish help. The events began to escalate. In 1391, Turkish raiders appeared along the lower Danube, pillaging the Hungarian border. They captured the castle of Galambóc, now Golubac, but General Perényi Péter later retook it. In 1394, Voivod Losonczy László of Transylvania set out to Wallachia, but he lost a battle against the Ottomans. However, in 1395 King Zsigmond struck back and secured a bridgehead in Bulgaria. The conflict was elevated to a higher level as Zsigmond finally recognized the Ottoman threat in earnest. He saw the Turks should be driven out of the continent for good. It was time to organize a crusade. Unfortunately, in 1396, the European Crusaders and King Zsigmond suffered a crushing defeat at Nicopolis. The Ottomans seemed unstoppable, and a new approach was needed. It was time to reorganize the structure of the entire Hungarian army and the southern defense system. A diet was held, and this assembly became a milestone in our military history. They required the landlords to provide a horse archer for every 20 peasant households, which many believe marked the beginning of the Hussar cavalry, as Húsz means 20 in the Hungarian language. However, this wasn't enough, as the Turk raiding parties broke into the heart of Hungary, reaching the Great Plain in 1398. In response, King Zsigmond established a southern borderland system, a double chain of castles that effectively blocked the raids. Each fort defended a valley, a region, and relied on nearby villages for supplies. The enemy's tactic was to soften up the area by burning villages, killing or enslaving peasants. Over time, the forts became isolated and more vulnerable to attack. To counter this, the Hungarians and Croatians deployed light cavalry, the Hussars, to patrol the countryside, tracking and eliminating the mostly irregular Ottoman raiding parties. It was during this period that the proverb was born, "A castle can only be defended in the field." Then history gifted us a small pause, and the huge pressure decreased on our border. Sultan Bayezid was defeated by the Mongol hordes of Timur Lenk at the Battle of Ankara in 1402. It was temporarily diverting the Ottomans from their Serbian and Hungarian targets. However, in 1415 Sultan Mehmed I, along with the Bosnian vassals, launched a campaign against Hungary and Croatia. 5 years later, the Ottomans invaded Wallachia and attacked Transylvania again. Fortunately, King Zsigmond had a talented Italian general, Pippo of Ozora, who led a successful Hungarian army in the lower Danube region in 1423, with 2 more campaigns following this. Pippo also played a very important role in building Hungary's southern defense system. It was in Pippo's court at Ozora Castle that the young Hunyadi János learned the ways of knighthood. Hunyadi later became one of the kingdom's greatest defenders, earning the title of Lightning of the War from the Turks for his devastating campaigns. In 1427, King Zsigmond secured the castle of Galambóc, Golubac, by treaty, but its Serbian captain sold it to the Turks for 12,000 gold ducats before the king could take it over. That same year, Nándorfehérvár, Belgrade, fell into Hungarian hands, becoming a crucial gateway to the kingdom. Zsigmond attempted to retake Galambóc by siege the following year, but he was betrayed by his Serbian allies and only narrowly escaped. In 1432, the Ottomans launched a massive raid into Transylvania, enslaving thousands. There were further minor raids into Transylvania in 1435 and 36, and In 1437 the Turks besieged the castle of Szendrő Smederevo, though they were forced to retreat. On the top of this, in 1437 a great peasant uprising in Transylvania weakened the region, allowing the Turks to plunder and pillage it in 1438. The Ottomans steadily advanced. In 1439 the Serbs lost the castle of Szendrő Smederevo, and in 1441 they captured the silver mines of Novo Brdo, Crna Gora. Despite Hunyadi János victory over some of their forces in Serbia. Hunyadi's brilliance shone again in 1442 when he defeated the Rumelian Beglerbey at Gyulafehérvár in Transylvania. General Hunyadi almost drove the Turks out of the Balkans in 1443 during his famous Long Campaign, demonstrating that the enemy could be defeated in open battles. His Long Campaign is still remembered as one of the most successful in the history of offensive wars during winter. A year later, in 1444, a tragic turn of events changed everything. King Ulászló of Hungary and Poland, also known as Vladislav, was killed at the disastrous Battle of Varna. His death shifted the tide in favor of the Ottomans. Had the Christian forces won, the Ottomans might have been pushed back to Asia. The fall of Constantinople could have been postponed or even prevented entirely. After the king's death, Hunyadi became the kingdom's governor. In 1448 his army ventured deep into Macedonia, but failed to join forces with the Albanian Skanderbeg's troops because the Serbs sided with the Sultan. Thus, the Christian army suffered a crushing defeat in the Second Battle of Kosovo. The greatest pressure fell on Nándorfehérvár or Belgrade Castle, which withstood numerous attacks. The crushing victory over the Turks by Hunyadi János in 1456 was the most significant of all. Had he failed, the bells might not ring at noon today. After the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Sultan Mehmed II faced defeat at Nándorfehérvár Belgrade, granting Hungary and Europe 65 years of relative peace. What might have been achieved if Hunyadi had not died of the plague shortly after this victory remains a matter of speculation. The Ottomans could capture the castle only in 1521. In our next episode, we will explore the life of Hunyadi's son, the great King Hunyadi Mátyás, known to the world as Matthias Corvinus Rex, and follow the events of the Ottoman wars until the Battle of Mohács in 1526. You have been listening to the Hungarian History Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please follow and consider subscribing on Substack. It helps me create more content like this. If you would like to support my work more directly, you can become a paid subscriber on Substack or find me on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. All the links are below. Thanks again for listening. See you in the next episode. This was Szántai Gábor with the Hungarian History Podcast. Goodbye! Sziasztok, a viszonthallásra!